Howdy, Dr. Mike here, welcoming you to this video series on evaluation. The purpose of evaluation is to know stuff. But how do we know stuff? Well, that's the overarching question that this video seeks to address, at least in respect to human-computer interaction. And we'll explore answers to this over the entirety of this three-part video series. To begin, we should probably first consider, at least at a high level, what the field of human-computer interaction actually is. Well, first, we commonly refer to it simply as HCI. And there's a number of different definitions of HCI out there, some of which are contradictory. But regardless of that, obviously we have humans and we have computing technologies. The overlap between them and just how well they interact together demands an understanding of what we call usability, creating usable computing interfaces that are easy for everyone to use, that are effective, safe, efficient, and accessible are core concerns of HCI. To do so, well, we need to know stuff. We need to know things. We need to know details about our users, especially in respect to how they engage with the design of a given computing interface, or again, the usability of a user interface. But how can we know this? Well, as I just noted a moment ago, how can we know anything? How do we know what we know? On the surface, the question of how we know seems pretty basic. Well, we know what we know because we've learned it, we've experienced it, or we just know it. Oftentimes, we don't even think about it. We don't even really know how we know what we know. But for knowledge about usability, that just won't cut it. We need to push deeper. And that's where this next concept comes into play. Epistemology. This comes from the Greek word episteme, which can be translated as knowledge or understanding or acquaintance, while logos can be translated as account, argument, or reason. And given these, epistemology as a word refers to the theory of knowledge, especially with regard to its methods, how we know things, validity, how we ensure our knowledge is true, and scope, what's actually worth knowing. So epistemology is the investigation of what distinguishes justified belief, what we are certain is true, from opinion. Now, there's many things that people tend to point to as to how we know what we know and how we know what we know to be true. Perhaps we've seen proof of something on television or in accounts on the news. Maybe, just maybe, there's a particularly wise and handsome professor who has presented and confirmed an idea that we've looked at in class. Possibly, it's something we've read about in a book, or it is something that we have seen on the internet, because, as we know, everything on the internet is true. Well, regardless of how you've come to know something, I think we can all agree that there is a sense of information overload in our society, perhaps even information fatigue from conflicting truths, particularly online. But that's a conversation for another class, because what we want to focus on here, and where the idea of epistemology is most important for us, has to do with a slightly different question. All of the sources we just considered speak to knowing things that already exist. But what about when we want to uncover something new that nobody else has yet uncovered? In other words, how do we build knowledge? For us, that might be understanding if a particular technology is usable. How do we create new knowledge about this? Well, that's where the methods and validity part of epistemology come into play. There are two main categories of approaches, or what we call methods, for creating new knowledge, or even for confirming existing knowledge. But really, we're focusing here on new knowledge. So that's with procedures to ensure as much as possible that these are valid ways of knowing. Scientific approaches that are based on counting or measuring some trait or variable, or what we might say is quantifying knowledge, are known as quantitative methods. Separately, the other category of scientific approaches to building new knowledge and knowing this knowledge is true focuses on ways other than measuring or quantifying. These are building qualitative understandings. So these are qualitative approaches. The emphasis with these methods is on detailed description, that is, deep quality of understanding something specific. This is different than quantitative approaches, which, again, boil understanding down to numbers so that they can be generalized to many. So at this point, of course, and rightly so, you're probably asking yourself, if, for example, we're creating a new user interface as part of a software application for an organization, or we're evaluating an existing technology to understand if it will be useful and usable for the tasks of a specific group of individuals, which of these two approaches is best? Just in general, even for building new knowledge about usability. Well, that's something that we're not going to answer right now. We'll answer that, sort of, and go deeper into these two approaches for building new knowledge in part 2 of the series on evaluation, so stay tuned.